Why was the air so heavy that morning, like it already knew what was coming? The sun was merciless over forward operating base horizon, the kind of heat that didn't just burn your skin but stripped patience off bone. Dust hung in the air, unmoving, shimmering like smoke. Sergeant Maya Reeves watched the new recruits spill out of the transport helicopter, squinting against the blinding glare. They stumbled under the weight of their gear, faces flushed, eyes darting between confusion and awe. Another batch of hopefuls, another cycle of lessons that had to be taught the hard way. Maya's fingers brushed against the worn grip of her sidearm, a habit, not a necessity. After 3 combat tours, 8 years in special forces, and too many close calls to count, she knew muscle memory was sometimes the only thing that stood between breathing and not. They look even younger this time, she thought. Captain Rodriguez, her old friend and commanding officer, approached from behind. His voice was rough, but there was a trace of humor in it. They looked like they were still learning how to shave last week. Maya smirked faintly. Let's hope they learn faster than they look. We don't have time for slow. He nodded, glancing toward the ridgelines beyond the base. The mountains were beautiful at a distance, but beauty meant little here. Intelligence had reported movement in those same hills, men with rifles and radios, the kind of movement that always preceded something bloody. That's why Maya was here, not for routine training, for preparation. Few instructors had her background, missions in Kandahar, hostage rescues in Mosul, and a medal she never mentioned. Rodriguez trusted her with what mattered most, turning raw recruits into soldiers who could survive. Among the sweaty, disoriented faces, one stood out. Tall, confident, too confident. Private James Hoffman. Maya had already studied his file. Former college quarterback, top of his class in basic, impressive physical stats, and a note in his record that said potential leadership candidate. Then another note, shorter, colder, attitude problem. That one's going to be trouble, Rodriguez muttered. Maya followed Hoffman's swagger as he laughed with another recruit. Nothing I haven't handled before, she said, though a quiet unease prickled under her composure. She'd seen that posture before, the kind of man who mistook discipline for weakness when it came from a woman, especially one half his size. She said nothing more, just watched. That evening the base settled into its rhythm, the rhythmic thump of rotors fatting, the metallic clang of gates locking, the muffled voices of soldiers joking to push away homesickness. But Maya didn't joke. She stayed late, reviewing rosters, refining drills. She wasn't just preparing them for training, she was preparing them for war. The next morning, the recruits assembled in the blistering sun, lined up for their first exercise, a simulated village clearing. Non-lethal training weapons, foam rounds, staged structures, but every inch of it designed to mimic the chaos of a real operation. Maya stood before them, expression unreadable. "This isn't a movie," she said, her tone cutting clean through the chatter. "You hesitate, you die. You get sloppy, your team dies. What you do here decides if someone gets to go home or doesn't." The recruits quieted, eyes on her. She demonstrated the entry technique, a smooth pivot, rifle high, angles tight. The movement was elegant, almost too fast to follow. Years of instinct turned into muscle memory. "This move saved my life once," she added. "During an embassy rescue in Mosul, 16 hostages walked out alive because we didn't flinch. That's what you're learning here." For a moment the recruits looked impressed, focused. Then from the back a soft chuckle. Private Hoffman leaned toward another recruit, whispered something, and both stifled laughter. Maya's gaze snapped toward him. "Something to share with the class, Private Hoffman." He straightened. "No, ma'am," he said, the ma'am rolling off his tongue like a mockery. Her expression didn't change. Good, because the last man who thought he knew better didn't come home. Don't make me tell his mother's story to prove a point. The smirk faded. The first few runs went well. Sweat, dust, shouted commands, simulated rounds cracking through the air. Most of them moved awkwardly but tried hard. That counted. Then came the final run. Maya paired herself with Hoffman, a deliberate choice. If there was arrogance, it had to be tested early. They moved toward the mock structure, her senses tuned to the smallest detail, the rhythm of his steps, his breathing, the way his shoulders tightened. She could tell something was off even before they reached the doorway. Instinct. She turned to give the go signal, then saw the flicker of movement. Hoffman's rifle wasn't aimed at the door, it was aimed at her. The barrel hovered inches from her forehead. The room froze, even the air seemed to stop moving. Bang, Hoffman whispered, barely audible. Her pulse didn't spike, her face didn't move, but every nerve in her body calculated 100 possibilities. He was testing her, challenging her. He didn't know he'd just made the most dangerous mistake of his life. She'd faced men with real guns, the flash of an AK's muzzle in a Kandahar alley, the moment she'd been pinned under rubble, blood in her mouth, watching the life drain from a teammate's eyes. Compared to that, this was nothing. But the disrespect, that was lethal in a different way. She stepped forward slowly, her voice calm. Interesting choice, Private. Her hand moved before anyone processed what happened next. One fluid motion. She deflected the barrel, pivoted inside his reach, swept his legs, and drove her palm into his chest. The rifle clattered against the floor as Hoffman hit the ground flat, choking for air. Maya's boot rested lightly against his throat. In real combat, she said softly, you'd already be dead, and your poor judgment would have killed your team too. The silence that followed was absolute. Then a voice, Sergeant Reeves, my office, now. Captain Rodriguez stood at the doorway, his tone unreadable. She released pressure from Hoffman's throat and stepped back. On your feet, Private. The walk across the base was long and wordless. Hoffman didn't meet her eyes. Sweat trickled down his temple. She could tell the embarrassment hurt more than the fall. Inside the office, Rodriguez leaned against his desk. We've got bigger problems than bruised egos. Maya folded her arms. Sir. Intel just came in. A Taliban splinter cell is planning an attack on the village of Khost. Locals say they're coming for informants. You know what that means. Maya did. Khost wasn't just another village. It was full of families who had risked their lives helping U.S. forces. We deploy in 1 hour, Rodriguez continued. You'll lead the response team. Hoffman will go with you. Maya's head turned sharply. Sir. Consider it real training, Rodriguez interrupted. Either he learns fast or he faces court-martial. Your call. Hoffman's jaw tightened, eyes flickering between defiance and something else, fear maybe. Within the hour, the helicopter blades thundered overhead again, whipping sand and heat around them. Maya sat opposite Hoffman, her expression unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. Stay tight, maintain formation, she said over the radio. These people trust me, don't make me regret bringing you. The mountains stretched below, harsh and silent. Somewhere down there, danger waited. They landed on the village outskirts. The quiet was wrong, too wrong. No children, no smoke from cook fires, just silence heavy enough to crush thought. Something off, Maya muttered. She raised her fist. Take cover. The first shot cracked a heartbeat later. Contact front. The air erupted in chaos. Bullets splintering walls, dust exploding around them, the sharp stink of gunpowder. Horizon, this is Reeves, she shouted into the comm. We are taking fire, multiple hostiles. Pinned behind a crumbling wall, she scanned the rooftops. Movement. A fighter positioning a mounted gun. Cover me, she yelled, then broke from cover before anyone could argue. Hoffman watched her sprint across open ground, moving like a ghost between bullets, returning fire with sharp, efficient bursts. 3 shots, 3 kills. The rooftop gunner fell. He'd seen plenty of instructors in his short career, None moved like that. Then came the call from command. Quick Reaction Force ETA, 20 minutes. Too long. Across the square, Maya spotted the village elder, her primary objective, huddled with his family. Between them, 30 meters of open, exposed ground. She didn't hesitate. I'll draw their fire. When they're focused on me, move the civilians. That's suicide, Hoffman snapped. This is what we do. And before anyone could argue, she was moving again, zigzagging through dust, drawing enemy fire like a magnet. Bullets tore through her vest, one grazing her arm. Hoffman's hands shook as he fired back. For the first time, arrogance was gone. She wasn't just giving orders, she was bleeding for them. He couldn't stay behind, not now. Cover the civilians. He shouted to the others and sprinted out into the open. Toward her. Toward the woman he had once aimed a rifle at. The world around him blurred, dust, smoke, screams. He didn't think, didn't calculate, just ran. Because somewhere between that training field and this gunfire, Hoffman had learned the truth Maya had lived by all along. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. He reached her before he understood how close he'd come to dying. The crack of gunfire swallowed every other sound. A round hissed past his ear, hot air kissing his skin. Another chewed through the edge of a mud brick wall inches from Maya's head. Stay down, she barked, pressing a blood-slick hand to her arm. But Hoffman was already beside her, panting, heart hammering like a jackhammer in his chest. He dropped to one knee, returning fire, his movements less polished than hers but quick, desperate, human. What part of protect the civilians was unclear, private. Couldn't let my commanding officer die on my first mission, he said through clenched teeth. Bad for my record. Even through the chaos, she almost smiled, almost. She scanned the field, 5 insurgents left, moving in pairs, trying to encircle their position. 2 left, 1 right, 2 flanking behind the schoolhouse, she muttered. We hold them here. The village smelled of heat and dust and fear. Every doorway looked like a shadow waiting to move. Maya fired short, controlled bursts, 3 rounds, 3 outcomes. 1 body fell, another dove for cover. Hoffman mirrored her rhythm without realizing it. She noticed. The arrogance was gone, burned away by survival instinct and adrenaline. A bullet ricocheted off the stone beside his head, showering him with fragments. He flinched but didn't retreat. When she spoke again, her voice softened beneath the command. Good discipline, keep your sector. Something shifted between them then. An unspoken recognition that leadership wasn't about shouting the loudest. It was about standing when others broke. Minutes stretched into hours. That's how firefights worked. The seconds felt eternal, and eternity ended in seconds. Then silence. Not peace, just a pause. The kind that means everyone's reloading or repositioning. Maya checked her ammo, 1 mag left. She glanced at Hoffman's trembling hands, the dirt streaked down his face, the wild focus in his eyes. He wasn't the same man who'd smirked in training yesterday. On my mark, she whispered. We push for that alley, it'll take us back to the others. Copy. She counted silently, 3, 2, 1. They moved. The world exploded again. A round grazed Maya's thigh. She bit down on the pain, dragging herself behind a low wall. Hoffman slid beside her, eyes wide. You're hit. Just another Tuesday. She tried to stand, but the leg gave way. He caught her before she hit the ground. Without hesitation, he slung her arm around his shoulders, half carrying her toward cover. Bullets shredded the air behind them. The sound was deafening, like a rainstorm made of metal. Halfway across the open street, a sharp, thunderous crack split the chaos. Not automatic fire, a single, deliberate shot. Sniper! Hoffman jerked violently, momentum carrying him forward. I'm hit, he gasped, clutching his shoulder. Blood darkened his sleeve. Maya grabbed him, pulling him toward the nearest doorway. Keep pressure on it. We're almost there. Every step was agony, her legs screaming, his arm weakening. But they didn't stop, couldn't. When they finally reached the compound where the rest of the team sheltered, both collapsed against the wall. The medic rushed over. We need to evac now. Maya shook her head. Not yet, civilians first. Sergeant, you're bleeding. So are half the people in this village. Her voice left no room for argument. Outside, the rhythmic chop of rotor blades grew louder, the quick reaction force finally arriving. Dust whipped through the alley as helicopters descended, kicking up a storm of sand and paper. Maya climbed to her feet, waving them in. Civilians first, move. Her leg barely held, but she stood. She always stood. Hoffman tried to protest, but she silenced him with a look, the kind that said orders aren't a debate. He nodded once, then started helping lift the children aboard. Minutes later, the last family was secured, then the wounded, then, finally, the soldiers. As the medics carried Hoffman toward the helicopter, he reached for her wrist, his voice hoarse over the roar. I was wrong about you, Sergeant. I was wrong about a lot of things. She squeezed his hand. Save it for the debrief. But her eyes softened before she turned away. He smiled faintly through the pain. For the first time, the smile wasn't pride, it was respect. The moment the helicopter lifted, dust swallowed her whole. She stood alone again in the fading light, watching the birds shrink against the horizon. Her radio crackled. All friendlies accounted for, mission success. Success, such a strange word. She sank onto a piece of broken wall, staring at her blood-stained hands. The village was quiet again, too quiet. Success always came with silence. That night after the base debrief, Maya sat outside the command tent under the thin Afghan stars. The desert wind carried the faint sound of generators, distant laughter, and the smell of diesel. Rodriguez stepped out, 2 mugs of instant coffee in hand. You look like hell. Feels about right. He handed her a cup, sat beside her on the crate. You saved those people. She stared at the dark mountains. We all did. You also saved Hoffman. Kid wouldn't be breathing if you hadn't pulled him out. Her jaw tightened. He's a soldier. I don't leave soldiers behind. Rodriguez nodded slowly. You ever think you're too hard on them? No, I think the world is. They drank in silence for a while. The night felt infinite. When he finally spoke again, his tone was softer. HQ wants you to stay on as lead instructor. You've got a way of making soldiers real. She gave a tired half-smile. Meaning what? Meaning they stop pretending to be heroes and start acting like survivors. Maya didn't answer. Her mind was already drifting to the faces in Coast, the children clinging to their mothers, the sound of gunfire echoing between clay walls. Every mission left ghosts, some louder than others. Weeks passed. The limp in her leg faded to a dull ache. The base routine returned. Drills at dawn, weapons checks, recruits marching in lines. But the story of Coast spread like wildfire. They whispered it in the mess hall, in the barracks, even during night watch. How Sergeant Reeves held the line despite being wounded. How she'd shielded civilians before herself. How a recruit once pointed a gun at her and later took a bullet protecting her. Stories grow with each retelling, but the core stayed true. And in that truth, something changed. The next batch of recruits looked at her differently, not as just another instructor, but as proof that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes, it bled quietly and kept moving. Hoffman returned 6 weeks later, arms still in a sling but eyes sharper, posture straighter. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet steadiness. When Maya saw him step into the training yard, she didn't say a word. She just handed him a rifle. Show them how it's done. Yes, ma'am. This time, the ma'am sounded like respect. He demonstrated the same room-clearing drill that had once gone so wrong. Every movement crisp, deliberate. The recruits watched, transfixed. Maya observed from the sideline, a faint pride flickering behind her calm. Rodriguez joined her. Kid requested Special Forces selection when he's cleared. She didn't look away. He won't make it easy on himself. He said you inspired him. She let out a slow breath. Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst mistakes. The captain smiled. You sound like Tanga's doll again. Her old mentor's name pulled a ghost of a memory. Gravel voice, iron eyes, that one lesson she never forgot. The moment you stop teaching, people start dying. She turned back to the recruits. Then I'm doing my job. That night the base lights dimmed early. The desert stretched endless and silver under the moon. Maya sat alone again outside the barracks, watching the horizon. The pain in her leg pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, alive. A shadow moved behind her, Hoffman. Couldn't sleep, he said quietly. Join the club. He hesitated. Sergeant back in training when I. She raised a hand. Don't apologize again, you already paid for it. He swallowed, nodding. Still, I needed to understand what I didn't back then, why you stayed calm, why you didn't lose it. Maya's eyes stayed on the distant ridgeline. Because anger wastes oxygen. Fear keeps you alive. You just have to learn which is which. They sat in silence for a while, the wind moving softly between them. Do you ever stop seeing it? He asked finally. The fights. The faces. She thought for a long moment. No, you just learn to live with the echoes. He nodded slowly, then stood. For what it's worth, I'm proud to serve under you. Her voice was quiet. Just make it mean something. When he walked away, she watched him disappear into the barracks light, then looked back at the mountains dark, waiting. She knew what came next. Orders always came, and the world always found new fires to walk through. But tonight, for a fleeting moment, there was peace. The kind of peace only earned after surviving chaos. And in that silence, the desert whispered a truth she carried with her always. Respect isn't given through rank or fear. It's written in what you're willing to stand for, when no one else will. Why did her orders come sealed this time? That was Maya's first thought when the envelope hit her desk at dawn, stamped classified EYES only. It wasn't protocol for field instructors, not unless something was changing. The paper still smelled of printer ink and aviation fuel when she tore it open. 2 pages, sparse clinical language, coordinates, operation code name, Iron Veil. No description of objectives, just assemble team of 7, departure 600 hours, destination coordinates undisclosed, mission leader Sergeant M. Reeves. Her stomach tightened. Missions without briefings were the kind that never appeared in after-action reports. Rodriguez entered without knocking. He carried 2 cups of coffee, same as always, but his face looked older somehow. You read it. Just did. He nodded toward the map pinned on the wall. You're heading east, beyond the ridgeline, close to territory we haven't touched since the ceasefire. Why now, she asked. Intel says an American convoy went dark last week. They were carrying prototype comm tech, something we can't afford to let slip into enemy hands. Command wants a retrieval team, not a firefight. Maya exhaled through her nose. Retrievals never stayed clean. Who's on my team? Rodriguez handed her a roster. She scanned it, familiar names, seasoned soldiers, then stopped halfway down. Private James Hoffman. She raised an eyebrow. Still my shadow, huh? Rodriguez shrugged. He requested you, said he'd follow your orders anywhere. She didn't respond, didn't need to. Somewhere inside she already knew what that meant. This wasn't just a mission for him, it was atonement. By sunrise, the team was ready. 7 soldiers geared up, weapons checked, eyes fixed on the helicopter that would take them into nowhere. The rotors howled as they lifted off, the base shrinking into a tan blur beneath them. Hoffman sat across from Maya, adjusting his vest. His arm had healed, but a scar peeked above his collar, a reminder of coast. He caught her watching and smiled faintly. "Permission to speak freely, Sergeant. You usually don't ask first." He grinned. "You ever get tired of this view?" She looked past him, the jagged spines of mountains, the endless desert beyond. "Every day," she said, "but it's home now." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Some homes just have louder ghosts." She didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. They landed at a barren plateau 2 hours later. Wind tore across the landing zone, carrying sand that bit into exposed skin. A single ranger from the advanced recon unit approached, saluting quickly. "Ma'am, we found the convoy remains 3 clicks east, burned out. No bodies." "No bodies?" "None, ma'am, but signs of struggle, tracks leading into the canyons. You'll want to see it." Maya's gut clenched. "Show me." The walk was silent except for the crunch of boots. The wreckage appeared suddenly, half buried in sand, 3 armored vehicles, blackened, twisted, and empty. Hoffman crouched beside a scorched tire. "Looks like they tried to fight back." "Too clean," Maya murmured. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they wanted." She traced a mark in the dirt with her glove, a symbol carved crudely into the ground, a circle bisected by a single line. Rodriguez had shown her that symbol once, years ago. A Black Ops faction that operated beyond oversight, mercenaries built from ghosts of disbanded units, men she'd fought beside and against. Her chest tightened. She knew that mark. "Sergeant," Hoffman called, "you recognize it?" She hesitated. "Not officially." But inside, a colder truth whispered, "They shouldn't exist anymore." The canyon ahead looked like a wound cut into the earth, narrow, jagged, suffocating. They descended single file, weapons raised, footsteps swallowed by echo. Every instinct screamed caution. Halfway through, Hoffman froze. Movement 12 o'clock. Maya raised a fist. The team halted. A figure appeared ahead, a man, unarmed, limping. His uniform half torn, insignia burned off. An American patch barely clung to his sleeve. "Don't shoot," he shouted. They surrounded him quickly, weapons steady. Maya stepped forward. "Identify yourself." "Lieutenant Crenshaw, 3rd Recon. I was with the convoy." "What happened?" His eyes darted toward the canyon walls, fear carved deep in his face. "They were Taliban. They spoke English, used our call signs. They knew our route, our loadout, everything." "Who are they?" He shook his head, trembling. "You won't believe me. They're ghosts, Sergeant. They're us." Before Maya could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Her training kicked in. Down. The explosion tore the canyon open. Dust, smoke, chaos. Crenshaw disappeared in the blast, swallowed by rock and flame. The team scattered, taking cover as bullets rained from above. "Ambush, top ridge, both sides," Hoffman yelled, firing upward. "Flank right," Maya commanded, voice cutting through the din. "Do not stay pinned." She moved like instinct, sliding behind a boulder, returning fire. Her heart pounded, but her mind stayed ice clear. Count shots, measure angles, read the rhythm of attack. 2 hostiles on the west ledge, disciplined fire, professional spacing. Not militants, soldiers. She aimed, squeezed twice. Both targets fell. The firefight lasted minutes, maybe less, but it felt eternal. When the last echo faded, only silence remained. Maya rose slowly, scanning the canyon walls. Nothing moved except drifting dust. Hoffman approached, breathing hard. They had night vision rigs, NATO grade. She met his eyes. "I know." "Then who the hell are we fighting?" She didn't answer, not yet. They made camp that night under a jagged overhang. The desert air turned bitterly cold after sundown. The team patched wounds, reloaded, and tried to make sense of what happened. Hoffman sat beside Maya, staring into the flickering flame. "That symbol you saw, what is it?" She hesitated, watching the fire dance in her eyes. "You ever hear of Task Unit Echo?" He frowned. Ghost stories. Off-books unit that went rogue after Bagram. They weren't ghost stories, she said quietly. I trained under their code during my first tour, Colonel Tangasdal. He taught us everything: precision, loyalty, discipline. Then command disbanded the unit after a mission went bad. Half the team vanished. Intel said they deserted. I didn't believe it. And now, she tossed a pebble into the fire. It hissed. Now I'm not sure what to believe. Hoffman leaned forward. You think they're still out there? I think we just met them. Silence. The desert wind howled low through the canyon. After a while, he asked softly, if they were your mentors, what happens when you're ordered to stop them? Her voice came out steady, but her hands trembled slightly against her rifle. Then I remember what they forgot, who we were supposed to be. At dawn, they moved again. The sun cut through the canyon like a blade. They followed fresh tracks leading east, boot prints, not sandals. The trail led to a narrow cave mouth half hidden by stone. Maya signaled for silence, then entered first. The darkness swallowed them whole. Inside, the air was stale, metallic. Tunnels wound deep into the rock. The walls were marked with the same symbol she'd seen at the convoy site. Half a kilometer in, they reached a chamber lit by flickering LED lamps. Crates lined the walls: ammo, gear, American issue. Hoffman opened one. Inside were encrypted radios with US markings. This isn't stolen, he whispered. This is stocked, someone supplying them. Maya's pulse quickened. Take photos, we'll send coordinates to command. Before they could, a voice echoed from the shadows. You shouldn't have come here, Reeves. Every muscle in her body froze. She turned toward the sound, a man stepping into the dim light. Gray beard, eyes like steel. The voice she'd once obeyed without question. Colonel Tangasdal. He smiled faintly. Didn't think you'd recognize the old man after all these years. Hoffman raised his rifle instantly. Maya held up a hand. Stand down. The colonel's gaze lingered on her. You were always the sharp one, always asked the right questions. Now you're leading babysitting drills while the war rots under bureaucracy. Maya steadied her breath. You disappeared, you left your people to die. I saved them, he said simply, from a system that eats its own. His words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. He gestured toward the crates. You think this is treason? No, Sergeant, this is survival. The missions they cancel, the people they abandon, we finish them. She took a step forward. By turning your guns on your own. He didn't blink. Sometimes loyalty means disobedience. Her finger tightened on her trigger, heart pounding. You train me to protect, not to justify murder. His smile faded. You still don't see it. They'll send you after me because you're the only one they trust. And when you do what they ask, they'll erase your name next, just like they erased ours. Behind her, Hoffman whispered, Sergeant, what now? Maya's eyes never left the colonel. What now, indeed? Because in that moment, she realized this mission wasn't about retrieval. It was about revelation. Command hadn't told her the full truth. They'd sent her here because of Tangasdal, not the convoy. She was the loose end they needed tied clean. But if that was true, whose side was she really on? The colonel lowered his weapon slowly. You can walk away, Maya. No one has to die here. Her voice came out steady but cold. You taught me better than that. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then a shout from the tunnel, contacts incoming. Gunfire erupted, flashlights flickered, the cave turned into chaos. Maya dove behind a crate, firing toward the entrance. Hoffman dragged her down, shouting over the roar. They're flanking. Hold the left. Explosions shook the chamber, sending rock and dust raining down. When the smoke cleared, Tangasdal was gone, so were half the crates. Only the symbol remained, scorched into the cave floor. A circle divided by a line. And a new war beginning in its shadow. Hours later, back at the extraction zone, Maya sat in the helicopter's dim cargo bay, blood drying on her gloves. Hoffman sat across from her, silent. He finally spoke. "You knew him." She nodded once. "What happens now?" She looked out the open hatch, the desert fatting below. "We find the truth, and if command doesn't like it," she met his eyes, "then we decide who we really serve." The rotors thundered. The horizon glowed red with the dying sun. And for the first time since Coast, Maya felt something she hadn't in years. Doubt. How do you report a ghost? That was the question burning through Maya's mind as the helicopter touched down at forward operating base horizon. The sun was barely up, a cold dawn washing everything in pale light. The base looked the same sand-colored barriers, same flags snapping in the wind, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Her team disembarked silently, exhaustion etched into every movement. Two men were limping, one had a bandaged head, and Hoffman's uniform was still streaked with cave dust. They looked like soldiers who had seen combat, except officially no combat had occurred. Rodriguez waited near the landing zone, hands clasped behind his back. The expression on his face wasn't relief, it was caution. Maya saluted, eyes sharp despite the ache in her leg. Mission complete, no assets recovered, hostile contact confirmed, casualties none. He nodded slowly. Command wants your debrief immediately, inside. Something in his tone told her everything she needed to know. They already have a version of the story. Inside the ops tent, the air was thick with the hum of monitors and stale coffee. Three officers sat at the long table, intelligence, operations, and an unfamiliar colonel in dark fatigues. The name tag read Harris. Harris gestured to a chair. "Sergeant Reeves, take a seat." Maya sat back straight, hands resting on the folder she'd brought, a report she knew they wouldn't want. Harris leaned forward. "We've reviewed satellite footage. No evidence of enemy presence in the area. No thermal signatures, no radio chatter. Are you certain about the engagement you described?" Her jaw tightened, certain enough to count the bodies. "Yet your team retrieved no weapons, no uniforms, nothing." "They used our gear," she replied evenly. "U.S. issue, suppressed comms, tactical spacing. Whoever they weren't amateurs." Harris's eyes flicked to Rodriguez, then back to her. "Sergeant, sometimes stress in the field." "Sir," she interrupted, voice cold but measured, "I've been under fire more times than I've celebrated birthdays. This wasn't hallucination." The room went still. The only sound was the slow tick of the wall clock. Harris closed the file. "We appreciate your service, but for the official record there was no hostile contact. Mechanical failure destroyed the convoy. Understood." She stared at him. "You're rewriting this." He met her gaze without blinking. "We're protecting operational integrity. This conversation never happened. Dismissed." Maya didn't move. "And if I don't sign that report?" Rodriguez spoke quietly from the corner. "Then you'll lose your clearance, Maya, maybe worse." Her eyes locked on his, searching for something, anything. He looked away first. That was answer enough. She signed, because sometimes survival meant choosing when to fight, not if. Outside, the desert wind tore through the base, scattering sand against metal. Hoffman waited near the barracks, expression dark. "What did they say?" She kept walking, that it never happened. He caught up, disbelief in his voice. "You're kidding." "Wish I was." "So what now? We just forget we were ambushed by Americans." Her tone was flat. "Officially, they weren't Americans." He stopped in his tracks. "You're going along with this." She turned, eyes hard. "You think I don't want answers, but you saw how this works. The minute we talk, they'll bury it deeper and us with it." He exhaled sharply, frustration spilling out. "Then what do we do, Sergeant?" Her reply was quiet. "We do what soldiers always do, we wait." For the next week, life pretended to return to normal. Drills, Patrols, paperwork, the rhythm of obedience. But beneath that surface, something restless stirred. Maya kept seeing the symbol burned into the cave floor. The colonel's face, calm under fire. His words, "They'll erase your name next." Every night she found herself at her desk long after lights out, cross-referencing old mission logs, supply chains, and declassified reports. Most of the files were redacted, but patterns emerged. Equipment shipments marked "lost in transit," coordinates matching locations of vanished units, and one name recurring in authorization codes, Colonel Harris. The same man who'd sat across from her in the debrief. The same man who'd erased her ambush. She felt the chills settle in her spine. 3 nights later, a coded message appeared on her secure terminal. No signature, just coordinates and a single phrase. "If you want the truth, come alone." The coordinates pointed to an abandoned communications relay north of the base. It could have been a trap, it probably was, but curiosity had always been her curse. At 200 she left her bunk, checked her sidearm and slipped into the desert. The night air was thin and sharp, the stars so clear they looked close enough to touch. She moved like shadow, low, silent, every step measured. When she reached the relay, the wind had died. The only sound was the faint hum of power lines long dead. A figure emerged from the darkness. "Hoffman." Her weapon came up instantly. "You have 5 seconds to explain." He raised his hands. "It's me. I sent the message." She lowered the gun slightly, still tense. "You realize you just impersonated a classified channel?" He nodded. "I had to. They're watching us, every call, every movement." "Then why risk it?" "Because I found something." He handed her a small flash drive, pulled from a damaged comm tablet in one of the wrecked trucks. Encryption took days, but the data's clean. She hesitated, then plugged it into her portable reader. The screen flickered, revealing transmission logs, outgoing coordinates, supply manifests, and signatures. At the bottom of the list, authorization, see Tangasdal. Her pulse spiked. This is impossible. He's supposed to be dead or rogue. Hoffman pointed to another entry. "Look closer. Those supply drops. They match missing shipments from our own base. Someone here is feeding him." Maya stared at the data, mind racing. It wasn't just a rogue faction. It was an inside network. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Command isn't covering up a mistake. They're complicit." They returned before dawn, slipping back unnoticed, but silence was heavy between them. Later that morning, Rodriguez called her into his office. He looked tired, almost haunted. "Close the door." She obeyed. He leaned back, exhaling. "You've been digging." She froze, "Sir." "Don't bother denying it. Intel flagged your terminal activity. They're worried you're unstable." "Unstable," she repeated softly, "for asking why we buried our own." He rubbed his temples. "Maya, listen to me. I know you. I know you wouldn't invent this, but these people, you don't win against them. You survive by shutting up." "I can't." He looked up. "Then you won't last here." Something in his tone wasn't threat, it was fear. She straightened. "Then I'll take that risk." Rodriguez sighed. "At least pretend to cooperate for both our sakes." She nodded once, but her mind was already elsewhere. That evening she found Hoffman cleaning his weapon outside the barracks. He looked up. "Bad news." "They're on to us." He set the rifle down. "Then we go public." "With what?" "2 soldiers, testimony against classified orders. They'll erase us before the first transmission uploads." He clenched his jaw. "Then we get proof that can't be erased." She studied him. The same recruit who once aimed a rifle at her, now ready to aim the truth at the institution itself. "You're serious?" He met her gaze. "You taught me that silence gets people killed." For the first time in weeks she smiled barely. "Then we do it my way, quiet, smart, clean." Over the next few days, they built a plan. Hoffman monitored shipment manifests. Maya traced communication relays. Piece by piece, they uncovered a pattern, routes disguised as humanitarian convoys carrying weapons to Tangasdal's network. But each discovery tightened the noose. Surveillance increased. Their rooms were searched. Two of Maya's soldiers were suddenly reassigned off base. Then came the final straw. An encrypted message on her personal channel. "You're being watched. Leave the base tonight or you won't leave at all." The sender, Rodriguez. Her throat went dry. At midnight, the alarm lights blazed red base lockdown. Over the loudspeakers, a voice thundered. "Sergeant Reeves, report to command immediately." She and Hoffman exchanged a glance. "We're out of time," he said. She grabbed the flash drive and stuffed it into her vest. "We don't go to them, we go through them." The corridors echoed with boots. Soldiers everywhere, search teams, MPs, confusion. Maya led Hoffman toward the motor pool. They moved fast, ducking behind containers, shadows slipping through chaos. A spotlight swept across the lot. "Stop where you are." Maya raised her weapon, fired once, flare round, blinding light filling the air. They bolted for the nearest truck. Engines roared. The gate ahead loomed, half-closed, guards shouting. Hoffman floored the accelerator. The truck smashed through the barrier, sparks and shrapnel flying. Bullets pinged off metal as they sped into the desert night. Only when the base lights disappeared behind them did either speak. "What now?" he asked. She stared ahead, the horizon black and endless. "Now we find Tangasdal before they find us." He glanced at her, realization dawning. "You're not running from him, are you? You're running toward him." She nodded once. "If he's the key, then he's also the proof. And if we bring that proof home, they can't erase us both." The truck thundered deeper into the dark. The stars stretched overhead, cold, merciless, beautiful. And for the first time, Hoffman understood what it meant to follow someone not because you had to, but because you believed. Hours later, as dawn bled across the sand, Maya looked back at the disappearing base, the place that had once been her world. Somewhere inside those walls, men were rewriting the truth. But truth had a habit of surviving. Sometimes it didn't march in broad daylight. Sometimes it crawled out of the dark, bloody, defiant, and alive. And as the first light touched her face, Maya whispered to herself, "If they erase the record, then we become the record." The desert swallowed the sound, carrying it east, toward the ridgeline, toward ghosts and redemption, toward the unfinished war that waited. What keeps a soldier fighting when there's no flag left to salute? The desert wind had no answer. It just howled through the ravine like a warning from the past. Maya gripped the wheel of the truck as the tires clawed through the sand, headlights cutting narrow tunnels of light into the dark. Her mind was running faster than the engine. They had escaped the base with seconds to spare. Now they were ghosts in their own war. Hoffman sat beside her, scanning the darkness with binoculars, his rifle balanced across his knees. "You sure about the coordinates?" They came from Tangasdal's old signal pattern. He's using relay points along the old border route. Always did favor terrain over tech. "Old habits die hard," Hoffman muttered. "Some don't die at all," she replied quietly. The road gave way to rock and gravel as they climbed higher into the mountains. The air turned thin and cold. By dawn, the truck was coughing smoke. They abandoned it near a dry riverbed and continued on foot. Each step echoed the same thought. They were now the hunted. By midday, the heat returned, pressing down like punishment. They found shelter under a ruined outpost, one of the many abandoned during the drawdown years ago. The walls were cracked, graffiti marking where soldiers once etched memories of wars no one remembered. Hoffman slumped against a broken window, drinking from his canteen. "You think Rodriguez knew everything?" Maya hesitated. "No, but he knew enough to warn us." Then why stay? Because not everyone gets to leave when they want to. Some people carry the weight so others can run. Hoffman studied her in silence, realizing he still didn't know her. Not really. She'd always been composed, unreadable. But now, beneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was something raw in her eyes, a kind of grief that didn't belong to one event, but a lifetime. He wanted to ask what she'd lost, but the question felt too personal for words. Instead, he said softly, "If Tangasdal trained you, he knows how you think. He'll expect you." "I'm counting on it," she replied. "He taught me to plan for the worst. Maybe he forgot what it looks like when the student stops following orders." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "That's the first cocky thing you've said all week." Maya allowed herself a thin grin. "Don't get used to it." That night they camped under the stars, their small fire burning low to avoid detection. The silence of the mountains pressed in like a living thing. Maya sat with her knees drawn up, staring into the flame. "You ever wonder what it costs?" What costs?" "All of it, the training, the loyalty, the things we tell ourselves so it feels worth it." Hoffman poked at the embers with a stick. "I used to. Then Coast happened. After that, I stopped wondering and just started trying not to waste what other people gave me." She looked at him then, not as his superior, but as someone who understood the same ghosts. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "A kid in my first unit. Thought courage meant never backing down. We were ambushed outside Helmand. He disobeyed a fallback order to pull a wounded civilian out of a kill zone, saved her life, lost his own. Command called it heroism. I called it consequence." Hoffman's throat tightened. "You were his co." She nodded. "I wrote the letter to his mother." The wind whispered between the stones. She exhaled slowly. "That's when I stopped chasing medals, started chasing truth instead." He watched her for a long time, then said quietly, "And here we are again." "Yeah," she murmured, "here we are again." By the third day, the terrain shifted from desert to jagged cliffs. Snow lingered in the shadows even under the harsh sun. They moved cautiously, following faint signs of activity: boot prints, vehicle tracks, a discarded ration wrapper marked in English. Hoffman crouched near a ridge, scanning through binoculars. There, South Valley, smoke. Maya took the binoculars. A small encampment hugged the mountainside, 4 tents, 2 armored vehicles, movement. She felt her pulse steady. That's him. They watched for hours, mapping guard rotations, identifying faces, and then she saw him. Colonel Tangasdal. Still upright, still commanding, talking with a group of men dressed like mercenaries but carrying American rifles. Beside him, another figure turned, and Maya froze. Colonel Harris. Her breath caught in her throat. "Son of a." Hoffman looked through the lens. "That's the intel officer who interrogated you." "Which means he's not covering for Tangasdal," she said. "He is Tangasdal's handler." Hoffman frowned. "So command in on it." "Not command," Maya said quietly. "A part of it, a black stream inside the river." She pulled out her notebook, marking coordinates. "We get proof of Harris here with Tangasdal. That's the kind of evidence they can't erase." Hoffman nodded. "Then we need eyes closer in." They waited until nightfall. The camp below glowed faintly with lanterns. The wind carried fragments of conversation in English, laughter too casual for war. Maya and Hoffman crawled down the ridge, using shadows as cover. They reached the outer perimeter silently, slipping past a sleeping guard. Near the command tent, voices rose. "Supply lines compromised," someone said. "Reeves knows," another voice replied, Harris's voice, cold, clipped. "She's too close, we need her contained." Tangasdal's reply came slow, deliberate. "She won't stop, not until she understands why we did this." "You mean why you did this," Harris said sharply. "Don't romanticize treason." "You call it treason," Tangasdal said. "I call it preservation. You left men in graves with no names. I'm making sure their ghosts have a purpose." There was a pause, then Harris, "And when those ghosts start talking?" Tangasdal sighed. "Then I suppose we'll need to silence them again." Maya's hand tightened on her rifle. Hoffman touched her shoulder gently. "Easy." She exhaled slowly. They recorded the conversation on Hoffman's field mic. It wasn't perfect audio, but it was enough. As they began to withdraw, a flashlight beam swept across the tents, straight at them. "Who's there?" a guard shouted. Maya and Hoffman bolted for cover. Gunfire erupted, ripping through the dark. "Go," she shouted, firing back as they sprinted up the slope. Bullets sparked off rock. Dust filled the air. A grenade exploded behind them, heat slamming into their backs. Hoffman stumbled, pain flashing across his face. "I'm fine, keep moving." They reached the ridge, diving behind a boulder as rounds whistled overhead. Hoffman groaned. Should have joined the Air Force. Too late now. They exchanged a tense grin before crawling to the far side of the ridge. Below, headlights flared, vehicles mobilizing. "They're coming." Maya glanced at her GPS. "Next valley's 5 clicks east. We reach it, we lose them." They moved fast, half running, half sliding through loose gravel. Behind them, engines roared closer. Then an avalanche of sound. A helicopter, not military issue. Black, unmarked, its floodlights slicing through the night. "Down," Maya shouted, diving into a rock hollow. The light swept past, then looped around. They couldn't outrun this. She reached for her comm, switching to an old frequency, one she hadn't used in years. "Foxtrot 7, this is Shadowline. If anyone's listening, we need pickup now. Coordinates transmitting." Static, then a familiar voice crackled through. "Copy that, Shadowline, thought you were dead." "Not yet." The voice belonged to Captain Rodriguez. Hoffman's eyes widened. "He's still helping us." "He's always helped us," Maya said quietly. Minutes later, the faint outline of another helicopter appeared from the west, small, low, fast. It dropped flares, confusing the pursuers, then swooped down toward their position. "Go," Rodriguez's voice thundered over comms. They sprinted through the blinding dust, Hoffman covering the rear. The unmarked chopper's spotlight swayed across the rocks as gunfire followed. Maya reached the ramp first, pulling Hoffman up behind her as the helicopter lurched skyward. Tracer fire streaked past them, dying as they climbed higher. The desert fell away beneath like a fatting scar. Rodriguez turned from the cockpit, helmet shadowing his face. "You two really know how to get attention." Maya dropped into a seat, breathing hard. "You picked a bad time for loyalty." He gave a grim smile. "Didn't do it for them, did it for you." He gestured toward Hoffman. "And the kid reminds me of you back when you still believed the system worked." Maya smirked faintly. "Back when you still had hair." He chuckled, then grew serious. "Whatever you found down there, it's bigger than you think. There's chatter from DC they're calling you rogue. Orders for retrieval are already out." "Retrieval," Hoffman echoed bitterly. "They mean elimination." Rodriguez nodded. "I can get you across the border, but after that you're ghosts." Maya leaned forward. "Then that's what we'll be, ghosts who tell the truth." He met her eyes. "You sure you're ready for what that costs?" Her voice was steady. "I've already paid most of it." Hours later, the helicopter touched down in a barren valley on the Pakistani side. The sun was rising again, soft gold over broken rock. Rodriguez shut down the engine. "This is as far as I go. I've erased the flight logs, but they'll figure it out eventually." Maya clasped his shoulder. "Thank you." He gave a weary nod. "You always had a thing for lost causes." "Someone has to find them again," she said softly. He smiled, then lifted off, leaving them in a whirl of dust and silence. Hoffman turned to her. "Now what?" She looked toward the east, the direction of Tangasdal's next known base. "Now," she said, tightening her pack, We finish what he started. He frowned. Which part? The right one. They started walking as the light grew stronger. Their shadows stretched long across the sand, two figures carrying the weight of too many truths. Somewhere ahead lay a man who had once taught her how to fight for something greater. Now she would remind him what that meant. And as they disappeared into the dawn, Maya's voice carried in the wind. If the system is built on lies, then the truth becomes the only weapon worth carrying. What happens when the line between duty and betrayal becomes the same road? The mountains answered only with silence. For 2 days, Maya and Hoffman hiked through jagged ravines, following the coordinates Rodriguez had hidden inside an encrypted file. The air thinned, each breath scraping like sandpaper. Snow glimmered on distant peaks. Every ridge looked the same, gray, scarred, unforgiving. By dusk on the second day they found it, a scar in the cliffside, half concealed behind fallen rock. From a distance it looked like a natural cave. Up close it breathed heat. Machinery hummed somewhere within. Maya crouched, studying the entrance through her scope. Thermals showing at least 6 inside, maybe more deeper in. Hoffman checked his rifle. How do we get in? She pointed to a drainage tunnel carved into the rock. Old mining shaft, looks wide enough for one. He grinned faintly. Ladies first. Keep talking and you'll be decoy. They slipped inside. The tunnel reeked of oil and metal. Water dripped from rusted pipes, echoing like heartbeats. Halfway through, faint voices filtered from deeper within, English, sharp, efficient. They emerged into a vast underground hangar lit by floodlights. Rows of crates bore military markings scrubbed half clean. Men in mixed uniforms moved briskly, assembling drones, loading ammunition. And there, at the far end, stood Tangasdal. Age hadn't dulled him. He carried himself with the same unbreakable poise Maya remembered from her first deployment. Beside him stood Colonel Harris, tablet glowing in his hands. Maya and Hoffman took cover behind stacked barrels. "Tell me you're recording this," she whispered. Hoffman tapped the mic clipped under his collar. Every word. They listened. Harris's voice echoed through the chamber. "Distribution continues tonight. Once the border patrol reroutes, the convoy moves." Tangasdal nodded, and Reeves. "Unaccounted for," Harris said. "But without clearance, she's a ghost. No one will believe her." "She was always resourceful," Tangasdal murmured. "If she survived, she'll come here. She'll need answers. Then she'll die getting them." Maya's jaw tightened. The words hit harder than gunfire. She whispered, "We need a data pull from that tablet. It's the hub." Hoffman's eyes widened. "You mean walk straight into the open?" She looked at him. "You've seen worse with me." He exhaled. "Yeah, and survived exactly none of them comfortably." They waited until the shift changed. Guards rotated, half moved toward the far corridor. Maya and Hoffman slipped out from cover, hugging the shadows. Every sense was alive. The metallic taste of adrenaline, the rhythm of her pulse syncing with her steps. They reached the operations table. The tablet glowed unattended for a moment. Maya plugged in a microdrive, downloading data in silence. Progress bar, 10%, 30%. Then a voice cut through the hum. "Still breaking rules, Sergeant." They turned. Tangasdal stood there calm, almost proud. Hoffman raised his rifle. "Easy," Tangasdal said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd never have made it past the ridge." Maya froze. "You knew we'd come." "Of course." He stepped closer, unarmed, hands visible. "I trained you to finish what you start." The download hit 70%. Maya kept her hand near the cable. "Why Harris? Why the shipments? What did you build here?" Tangasdal's eyes softened, almost pitying. "The world abandoned these men. Promises broken, medals traded for silence. I gave them purpose. You think Washington cares who bleeds as long as the story ends tidy?" "This isn't purpose," she said. "It's revenge wearing a flag." He smiled faintly. And what are you doing, Maya? Hunting your own for a truth no one will ever print. Her silence was answer enough. Behind her, Hoffman whispered, "Download complete." Tangasdal noticed, "You think a file will save you? It'll expose you." He chuckled, low and tired. "Expose me to who? The same machine that built me. You still don't get it. You can't burn a system that already runs on fire." Maya took a step closer. "Maybe not, but I can light a match." Harris appeared from the corridor, gun drawn. "Sir, step back." For the first time, Tangasdal hesitated, eyes flicking between Harris and Maya. Then chaos. Hoffman fired first, hitting the lights. Darkness crashed down. Muzzle flashes painted ghosts across the room. Maya dove behind a crate, dragging Hoffman with her. "Move," she hissed. They sprinted toward the exit tunnel as alarms wailed. Harris's voice boomed through loudspeakers. "Seal the entrances." A steel gate began descending ahead of them. Hoffman slid under just as it slammed shut behind. Maya was half a second slower, metal screeched, trapping her pack strap. She tore free, shoulder screaming, and rolled into the next corridor. They ran blind through the maze of tunnels. Behind them, shouts and gunfire echoed. At a fork, Maya paused, gasping. This way toward the ventilation shaft. They burst through a side chamber filled with storage drums. Footsteps thundered behind them. Tangasdal's voice echoed faintly. "Reeves, don't waste it. Come back, we can finish this together." She spun, fury cutting through fatigue. "You already finished it the day you stopped caring who you killed." Hoffman yanked her arm. "We have to go." They climbed the shaft ladder 2 rungs at a time. The metal groaned. Below, flashlights sliced through the dark. A gunshot pinged off the ladder inches from her boot. Then daylight. They erupted from the tunnel mouth onto the ridge, lungs burning. A snowstorm had started, wind howling like artillery. Maya pulled a flare from her vest, ignited it. "Rodriguez, we need pickup, coordinates Alpha 3. Static answered. Then his voice, broken but clear, "Inbound, 10 minutes." They crouched behind boulders, scanning the valley. Below, armed trucks were mobilizing, lights cutting through the snow. Hoffman reloaded. "We're not making 10 minutes." Maya opened her rifle's chamber, checking rounds. "Then we make 9. The firefight began with a scream of wind and bullets. Snow exploded around them. Hoffman's return fire was precise, each shot deliberate. Maya moved like instinct, counting bursts, conserving ammo. A truck skidded sideways, engine smoking. Another round pierced its tank, flames burst skyward. "Contact left," Hoffman shouted. She pivoted, firing 3 times. 2 silhouettes fell. The third kept advancing until her last round dropped him. Then silence again, only the storm. Maya's rifle clicked empty. She exhaled shakily, steam curling from her lips. Hoffman grinned through the exhaustion. "You still don't miss." "Comes with age," she said, reloading a sidearm. A low rumble built in the distance, rotors. Rodriguez's chopper broke through the snow curtain, tilting toward the ridge. "Move," Maya grabbed Hoffman's arm. They scrambled across the rocks as Tangasdal's men regrouped below. Bullets tore the air. They dove into the open ramp. Rodriguez yanked them inside as the bird lifted. Explosions dotted the valley beneath, flames licking upward, devouring the compound's entrance. Maya stared down, chest heaving. "We got the data." Rodriguez glanced back. "Then let's make sure it doesn't die with us." They landed across the border in a half-abandoned NATO depot. The sky had cleared. Dawn painted the snow gold. Hoffman slumped against the wall, bleeding from a graze. "Tell me the hard part's over." Maya inserted the flash drive into a secure console. Lines of code streamed across the screen, mission rosters, funding trails, names. Harris, Tangasdal, contractors, politicians. Her breath caught. They used humanitarian convoys to arm private militias, paid with defense funds listed as reconstruction aid. Rodriguez whistled low. That's a career-ending secret. Or life-ending, she said quietly. A transmission alert blinked. She opened it. A single text. Delete the file, Maya. Come home. No signature, but she knew the voice behind those words. Tanga's doll. Hoffman stared at the screen. He's still alive. Always will be, she murmured. Men like him don't die easy. Rodriguez folded his arms. What's the play? Maya saved a copy to an encrypted drive and pocketed it. We send the data anonymously. Multiple channels, multiple continents. Then we disappear. Hoffman frowned. Disappear where? She looked out the window, the endless white stretching into horizon. Somewhere the noise can't reach. He studied her for a long moment. You really think the truth will change anything? She turned to him, voice soft but certain. Maybe not, but it deserves to exist. He nodded slowly, understanding. Rodriguez started prepping the helicopter again. You've got 1 hour before they triangulate the signal. Then we scatter. Maya stood outside for a while, letting the wind sting her face. The mountains loomed silent, impassive. She thought of Tangasdal's words, of Harris's ambition, of every soldier lost to someone else's agenda, and of herself, still standing somehow. Hoffman joined her, jacket collar pulled up. What happens after we vanish? She smiled faintly. You pick a new name, grow a beard, get fat somewhere quiet. He laughed softly. And you? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe I finally stop fighting ghosts. He looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. Respect, gratitude, the strange bond forged only in war. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For not leaving me behind. She looked toward the horizon. That's not how I was trained. The radio crackled from inside. Rodriguez's voice, signal sent, they know now. Maya stepped back in. The console showed confirmation of multiple transmissions bouncing through encrypted networks worldwide. It was done. Rodriguez shut everything down. We should go before someone decides to silence us for good. They packed quickly. As they prepared to lift off, Hoffman glanced back at the compound data scrolling across the dark screen. What if they find us again? Maya strapped in, voice calm. Then they'll have to admit we were real first. The rotors spun. The helicopter rose into the thin air, cutting across sunlight-washed peaks. Below, somewhere buried in stone and shadow, Tangasdal watched the smoke fade from his ruined base, radio in hand. He smiled faintly, muttering to himself, she learned well. Then he turned away into the dark tunnels, his voice echoing softly. Truth or lie, it's all war in the end. In the chopper, Maya closed her eyes as the wind roared around them. The mountains receded, but their echoes stayed. She thought about the cost of truth, how it never arrived clean, how it demanded pieces of you in return. And yet she felt lighter. Not free, but lighter. Sometimes survival wasn't about winning battles. It was about walking away still knowing who you were. As sunlight broke through the clouds, she whispered, more to herself than to them. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. How long can you run before the truth finds you again? For 72 hours they lived in motion. No calls, no names, no flag, just airfields that didn't exist on maps and border roads that changed with every sunrise. The file had detonated across the world like shrapnel. By the second morning, anonymous outlets were publishing fragments, supply chains, photos, grainy video of Harris at Tangasdal's base. Governments denied everything. Contractors swore forged evidence. But the questions had started, and questions were harder to kill than people. Maya watched the headlines scroll across a flickering motel television in the foothills of Kashmir. Hoffman sat on the bed behind her, disassembling his pistol out of habit. They're calling it Operation Phoenix, he said. Sounds cleaner than what it was. Maya muted the screen. Truth never sells unless you dress it up. He looked at her reflection in the dark glass. You don't look relieved. I'm not, she said. Every time a secret gets out, someone's ordered to bury the messenger. She turned off the TV. Silence swallowed the room, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan. 2 days later, they met Rodriguez in a crowded bazaar outside Islamabad. He blended with the civilians' beard-grown, local clothes, eyes scanning every corner. You lit the fuse, he murmured as they walked. Now the fire's running uphill. Reactions, Maya asked. Half the intel board in lockdown. Harris disappeared. Command claims Tangasdal's dead, but no body. Meanwhile, someone's putting prices on your heads. Hoffman smirked. At least we're worth something now. Rodriguez shot him a look. You joke, but they've sent hunters, ex-contractors, same kind you exposed. Maya's voice stayed steady. Then we keep moving. Rodriguez shook his head. Not enough. You need to vanish properly. I can get you across the border into Nepal. After that, burn the rest of your life. She hesitated. And you? I'll buy you 12 hours before they trace this meat. After that, I'm a ghost too. He stopped, meeting her eyes. Don't look back, Maya. Whatever you think you owe the dead, it's paid. But she knew that was a lie. Some debts collected themselves. Night fell hard over the mountain road. They drove without headlights, the jeep's tires whispering on gravel. Hoffman broke the quiet. What if he's still alive? Maya didn't answer immediately. Then he's watching the same chaos we are, and waiting for me to flinch. Would you? She glanced at him. You've seen me flinch. He smiled faintly. Not yet. The smile faded as a flash lit the sky behind them, brief, orange, too far to hear but close enough to feel. A fuel depot maybe, or a message. Guess they found Rodriguez, Hoffman whispered. Neither spoke for a long time after that. By dawn they reached a monastery carved into a cliffside. The monks there traded silence for shelter, no questions asked. Within its cold stone halls, time slowed. For the first time in weeks, Maya slept. When she woke, snow was falling outside, thick and soundless. Hoffman sat near the doorway, carving lines into a piece of wood, a habit he'd picked up on the road. What are you making? She asked. He shrugged, something to prove we existed. She watched the falling snow. We existed the moment we chose to do the right thing. The rest is just noise. He looked up. Then why do you still look like you're waiting for orders? Because she was, not from command, from conscience. 3 nights later, a courier arrived at the monastery gates, a boy no older than 16, soaked from the storm. He carried a small package wrapped in oilcloth. For you, he told Maya. Man said you'd understand. Inside, a single radio transceiver, old model military. When she powered it on, static filled the room, then a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Tangasdal. You're good, Reeves. I underestimated how far you take it. But you know as well as I do, truth without context is just ammunition for someone else's war. Hoffman's face went pale. He's tracking us. Maya listened silently as the voice continued. Come to where it began. The coordinates are yours. Come alone. Let's finish what we started before someone else decides how this ends. The transmission cut. She stared at the numbers blinking on the small screen. The location sat deep within the Hindu Kush, not far from their first mission years ago. Hoffman grabbed her shoulder. It's a trap. Probably. Then why go? She met his eyes. Because the only thing worse than dying for a lie is living without ending it. They left before dawn. The monks said nothing, only handed them supplies and a compass. The trail climbed into frozen silence, the kind that made even breathing feel loud. Hours turned to days. The The coordinates led them through narrow passes until, finally, they saw it. An old forward operating post half buried in snow. The same one, where Maya had trained under Tangasdal years ago. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, memories bleeding through, the echo of shouted drills, the smell of burnt oil, the ghost of her younger self standing at attention. Hoffman's breath steamed in the air. "You sure you want to do this?" She handed him the drive with the master copy of the data. "If I don't come back, you finish the upload from Kathmandu." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." "This isn't about loyalty," she said. "It's about legacy. Someone has to survive to tell the story right." He stared at her, jaw tight, then finally nodded. "Don't make me write your letter." She smiled faintly. "Wouldn't be the first one I've written." Then she walked into the compound alone. The interior was almost exactly as she remembered, stripped, cold, echoing with wind. A single lantern burned near the center, casting long shadows. Tangasdal stood beside it, wrapped in a heavy coat. His rifle leaned against the wall, untouched. "You came," he said softly. "You called." He studied her face as if memorizing it. "You always had that look, half soldier, half skeptic. You taught me to question everything." He nodded once. "And now you question me." "I don't question you," she said. "I condemn you." He smiled sadly. "And yet you came to hear me explain." She said nothing. Tangasdal gestured toward a battered map spread on the table. "Look, this is the war we were supposed to win. 10 years of blood and contracts and lost names. I stayed when everyone else cashed out. You think that makes me the villain? You turned survivors into mercenaries. I gave them purpose when command gave them abandonment. Do you know how many letters I wrote to families because bureaucrats refused to acknowledge their sons existed?" "I know," she said quietly, "because I wrote some too." They stood in silence, snow tapping against the roof. Tangasdal's voice softened. "You think leaking that file fixes anything? It'll create another war. Maybe not on battlefields, but in rooms where people decide which truths to keep." "Maybe," Maya said, "but at least the world will know what was done in its name." He stepped closer. "You really believe exposure brings justice? All it brings is vacancy. Power never disappears, it just moves to the next willing hand." She looked into his eyes. "Then I'll keep taking it from them until there's none left." For a moment, pride flickered there, teacher recognizing the student's final lesson. Then his expression hardened. "They'll hunt you forever." "I'm used to being hunted." They stood inches apart. Years of mentorship, betrayal, and belief hung between them like a loaded weapon. Tangasdal's hand drifted toward his rifle. "You walk away now, Reeves, and I'll make sure you live long enough to regret it. Stay, and you'll die knowing you were right." Maya's own hand rested on her holster. "I didn't come for permission." Outside, the wind howled like memory. When the first shot rang out, it was swallowed by snow. Hoffman waited at the ridge, watching the compound through binoculars. He saw flashes of light, then silence. Minutes crawled. Then a figure emerged through the storm, stumbling, steadying, moving with the unmistakable gait of someone who had survived too much. "Maya." She reached him, face pale, blood spattering her sleeve. He caught her arm. "You're hit." "Nothing vital." He looked past her shoulder, and him. She shook her head once, ended his war. For a long time they said nothing. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and snow. Finally she looked east. "Let's finish the upload." He nodded, helping her toward the trail. "What will you tell them?" "The truth," she said, "all of it, whether they listen or not." They reached the radio tower at dawn, the same network Tangasdal once used to broadcast orders. Hoffman connected the drive. Lights flickered to life as files streamed into every open channel, governments, NGOs, journalists, even enemies. No one could hide it now. As the final packet uploaded, Maya leaned against the railing, bleeding through her jacket, watching the sun rise over the snow-covered peaks. "It's done," Hoffman said quietly. She nodded. "Then maybe someone else can start where we stop." He turned toward her, eyes heavy with worry. "You need a medic." She smiled faintly, always giving orders now. The smile lingered as the wind picked up, scattering the first light of day across the endless white. Below, the compound smoldered, smoke rising like a confession. For a long time neither spoke, then Hoffman broke the silence. What was he like before all this? Maya's eyes stayed on the horizon. "He believed the same thing I did once, that loyalty could fix the world. We were both wrong." "About loyalty?" "No," she said, "about the world." He nodded slowly. "So what now?" She exhaled, letting the cold fill her lungs. "Now we disappear. Let the truth live without us." He glanced at her bleeding arm. "You're not dying on me." She smiled, barely audible over the wind. "Not today." They started down the slope together, two shadows fading into light, the transmitter still humming behind them, carrying the story farther than either could follow. And somewhere in offices oceans away, screens lit up with the first wave of leaked documents. Names, numbers, proof. Panic followed, denials, resignations, investigations. For once, the silence that had buried 1,000 soldiers cracked open. And in that fracture, truth breathed. When the noise finally stopped, she didn't recognize the silence. For weeks it had been gunfire, engines, coded voices, the endless pulse of survival. Now, in a one-room cabin buried deep in the mountains, there was only wind brushing snow from the eaves and the slow rhythm of her heartbeat. Maya sat by the small stove, a blanket over her shoulders, steam rising from a chipped mug. Her left arm still ached when the weather turned. The bullet had missed the artery by a whisper. Hoffman had stitched it himself in the back of a truck before they vanished into Nepal. He moved quietly around the room, packing what little gear they owned. "You sure you don't want to keep the radio?" She shook her head. "No more signals, not from us." He studied her for a moment, then disconnected the antenna. Outside, the mountains gleamed like frozen ghosts. The world below was burning with questions. Governments had fallen. Trials had begun. News anchors spoke Tangasdal's name like a curse, and Harris's photograph filled every screen. Files that should never have existed became public record. For the first time, ordinary people said the words special operations with both awe and sorrow. But none of it reached the cabin. That was the point. Maya read fragments in smuggled papers, half-truths, distorted timelines. Some painted her a hero, others called her traitor. Both felt wrong. One headline caught her eye. UNCONFRMS 143 CIVILINS cleared of collateral damage, LABELS after leak. She folded the paper carefully, almost tenderly, as if it were a letter from the dead. Hoffman returned from chopping wood, snow in his hair. "You've read that thing 10 times. They finally named the kids from Coast," she said quietly. "Took 2 years, but they did." He sat across from her. "That's something." "It's everything," she whispered. Days bled into each other. They hunted, fixed leaks, learned to live with quiet. Hoffman built a small radio set out of scrap, tuning sometimes to distant music, proof that the world kept turning. At night the fire cast their shadows long against the walls. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes silence said more. One evening he asked, "You ever think about going back?" "Back where?" "Home, family, a name that isn't on a watch list." She smiled faintly. "Home stopped being a place a long time ago, it's people, and I've got one left." He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. Spring crept into the valley. Ice melted from the eaves, streams ran again. Maya's limp grew lighter. One morning she found Hoffman outside, carving another piece of wood. The first had been a crude token. Now the figure took shape, two soldiers standing back to back. She watched him work. You keep making statues of ghosts. He smiled without looking up, keeps them from feeling lonely. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, you're free to go, you know. There's a world out there that doesn't know your face. He set the carving down. And leave the only person who remembers who I was before all this, not interested. Something in her chest eased, something she hadn't let herself feel since Kandahar. Months passed, rumors filtered through traders and travelers. The leak had reshaped more than politics. A global inquiry was underway. Veterans testified. New regulations passed. None of it erased the blood, but it gave it meaning. And sometimes, meaning was enough. One evening, near sunset, Maya hiked alone to the ridge above the valley. The sky blazed gold over the peaks. She sat on a rock, breathing thin air, letting the silence fill her. From her pocket she took a small folded photo, edges worn, colors faded. Her first unit. Tanga's doll in the center, younger, confident. Herself to the side, eyes fierce, naive. She held it to the wind, then let go. The paper lifted, caught the light, and vanished into the sky. "Goodbye, sir," she murmured. Behind her, footsteps crunched in the snow. Hoffman appeared, carrying 2 tin cups of tea. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, "just clearing room for the living." He handed her a cup, sat beside her. The mountains glowed, endless and quiet. Weeks later, a messenger arrived. Rodriguez's handwriting on the envelope. She hadn't known if he'd survived. The note was short. "They're rebuilding under new command. Your names were cleared in absentia. Don't come back, stay free. R." She read it twice, folded it, and slipped it into the stove flame. Freedom only mattered if it couldn't be revoked. Summer came. The cabin filled with the scent of pine and earth. Hoffman built a small garden. Maya taught him to shoot left-handed since his shoulder still stiffened in the cold. They talked sometimes about writing it all down. Not for fame, not for revenge, just so the story wouldn't vanish. But every time they began, words felt smaller than what they'd lived. One night, while thunder rolled across distant peaks, she finally said it aloud. "Maybe the story isn't ours anymore. Maybe it belongs to whoever listens." Hoffman nodded. "Then we've done enough." On the first day of autumn, a group of local children wandered up the trail, chasing a lost goat. When they saw the cabin, they stopped, curious, cautious. Maya stepped outside, smiling softly. "You lost something." One girl pointed, "Our goat." She helped them retrieve it from the brush. The smallest boy stared at the scars on her hands. "Are you a soldier?" he asked. Maya paused. "I was." "Did you win?" She looked at him, unsure how to answer, then finally said, "I stopped fighting." The boy nodded as if that were enough. When they left, Hoffman watched from the doorway. "You think they'll remember you?" Maybe they'll just remember the goat." He laughed. "That's probably better." Winter returned again. Snow fell thicker this time, soft and unending. Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight. Maya wrote in a small notebook, dates, names, places. Not for history books, just for truth's sake. When she finished, she tore out the last page and slid it under the floorboard. A message for whoever might someday find the place. "If you read this, know that we were real. We did what conscience demanded. Not for glory, not for medals. Just so silence would mean something again." She closed the notebook, placed it on the shelf, and looked out the window. The world below would keep arguing, rewriting, forgetting. That was its nature. But somewhere, truth had survived long enough to grow roots. At dawn, Hoffman found her outside watching the sunrise. "Can't sleep." She shook her head, "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how quiet it gets when you stop trying to be understood." He stood beside her, the horizon stretching infinite. "You regret any of it?" She thought for a long time. Every wound, every loss, every lie we told to stay alive, but not the moment we chose to tell the truth. that one I'd live again. He nodded, understanding. They stood in silence as the first light broke over the peaks, painting everything in gold. Maya whispered, "Do you think people ever change, Hoffman?" He smiled, only when it cost them something. Later that day, she climbed to the ridge alone. The wind was strong, cold, carrying the scent of snow. From her pocket she drew the small carved figures Hoffman had made, two soldiers back to back. She set them on a stone and stepped back. "Stay here," she murmured, "guard the quiet." She turned and began the slow walk down. Behind her, the little statues stood against the wind, unyielding. Years would pass. Travelers would tell stories about a woman and a man who lived in the high valley, who helped strangers, who asked for nothing. Some said they were deserters, others said saints. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in between. And far below, in cities pulsing with new wars and new lies, someone would stumble upon an old archive, files from a leak long forgotten, and read a name, Sergeant Maya Reeves. They would search for her and find nothing. No records, no graves, just a legend about a soldier who vanished after exposing the system that created her. High in the mountains, the cabin would still stand. The floorboard would still hide the page, and the wind would still carry the faint echo of a voice, softer than memory, stronger than time. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.